They told her the basement was off limits. They said it was just faulty wiring and old pipes. But Sarah knew the difference between the settling of a house and the sound of a desperate man fighting for his life. She was just a maid, invisible, poor, and easily disposable in the world of Chicago's elite. But the moment she turned that rusty key and opened the heavy iron door, her life as a servant ended, and a dangerous game of survival began. She didn't just find a prisoner in the dark. She found the king of the city, and he was ready to burn the world down for the woman who set him free. This is the story of how a $20 an hour maid became the most powerful woman in the underworld. The sprawling estate of the Harrington family sat on the edge of Lake Forest, Illinois, a monument to old money and cold hearts. To the outside world, Richard Harrington was a respectable logistics tycoon, a man who donated to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra and held charity galas for endangered wetlands. But inside the limestone walls of his mansion, the atmosphere was suffocating. Sarah Miller adjusted the collar of her black uniform, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. At 24, she looked tired. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight, severe bun, and dark circles shadowed her hazel eyes. She had been working for the Harringtons for 6 months, and every day felt like walking through a minefield. "Sarah!" The shrill voice of Mrs. Harrington echoed from the parlor. Sarah flinched, grabbed her feather duster, and hurried into the room. Patricia Harrington was lounging on a velvet chaise, sipping a mimosa at 10 in the morning. She didn't look up as Sarah entered. "The rug in the library has a smudge. Fix it. And then I need you to take the silver service down to the basement storage." "The lower storage." Sarah froze. "The lower storage, ma'am. Mr. Harrington specifically told the staff that the sub-basement was under renovation. He said it was dangerous." Patricia finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. She was a beautiful woman, but her face was hardened by years of bitterness and secrets. "Richard is in the city for a meeting with the zoning board. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. I need that space cleared for the new wine shipment arriving next week. Do as you are told, or I'll find someone else who will. God knows there are plenty of girls desperate for a paycheck." Sarah swallowed her pride. She needed this job. Her younger sister, Emily, was in a rehab facility in Wisconsin, and the monthly bills were astronomical. Sarah was the only thing standing between Emily and the streets. "Yes, Mrs. Harrington," Sarah whispered. She spent the next hour scrubbing a non-existent stain from the Persian rug, her mind racing. The staff whispered about the sub-basement. The cook, a kindly woman named Mrs. Gable, had claimed she heard thumping noises coming from the vents late at night. The chauffeur, a brute named Kenzo, stood guard by the heavy oak door leading downstairs whenever Mr. Harrington was home. But Kenzo was gone today, driving Richard to the city. Sarah gathered the heavy box of tarnished silver platters. Her arms strained under the weight as she navigated the narrow servants' staircase. She reached the main basement, which was filled with unused gym equipment and holiday decorations. But at the far end, behind a stack of dusty crates, was the reinforced steel door that led to the sub-basement, the original foundation of the 1920s house. It was usually locked with a heavy digital keypad, but today, likely due to Mrs. Harrington's orders to prepare for the wine, the light on the pad was green. Sarah pushed the door open. A draft of cold, damp air hit her, smelling of mold and something metallic, like copper. The stairs were concrete and steep. She descended carefully, clutching the box of silver. The sub-basement was a maze of brick archways. It was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb hanging from a frayed wire. Sarah placed the box on a wooden pallet and wiped her hands on her apron. She turned to leave, anxious to get back to the warmth of the upper floors. thump. The sound was distinct. It wasn't a pipe. It wasn't the house settling. It was the sound of flesh hitting wood. Sarah stopped, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling. "Is someone down here?" Silence. Then a low, ragged groan. Fear told her to run. Survival instinct told her to lock the door and never look back. But Sarah had a fatal flaw. She was too kind for her own good. She took a step toward the shadows in the far corner, where an old coal chute had been boarded up. "Mrs. Gable?" she whispered, thinking perhaps the cook had fallen. She rounded the corner and dropped to her knees in shock. There, chained to a thick support beam, was a man. He was in bad shape. His expensive charcoal suit was torn and stained with dried blood. His hands were bound with heavy industrial zip ties, and a thick chain secured his ankle to the pillar. His dark hair was matted, and his face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. But even in this state, slumped against the cold brick, he radiated a terrifying kind of power. He lifted his head slowly. His good eye, a piercing shade of icy blue, locked onto hers. "You," he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel. "You're not one of them." Sarah scrambled backward, her hands scraping against the rough floor. I'm just the maid. I didn't know. I have to go." "Wait," he commanded. It wasn't a plea, it was an order. "If you run, they will kill you. If they know you saw me, you're dead." Sarah froze. She knew he was telling the truth. The Harringtons were cruel, but she had never imagined this. Kidnapping? Torture? "Who are you?" she whispered. The man let out a dry, humorless laugh that turned into a cough. "My name is Damon Valenti, and I own this city." Sarah's blood ran cold. She knew the name. Everyone in Chicago knew the name. The Valenti family controlled the unions, the shipping yards, and half the real estate in the Loop. Damon Valenti had been reported missing 2 weeks ago. The news said he was likely on a private island, evading tax evasion charges. They were wrong. He was here, rotting in her boss's basement. Sarah stared at the man. Damon Valenti, the most feared man in Chicago, was bleeding out on the floor of the house she cleaned. "Mr. Harrington," Sarah stammered, her mind struggling to connect the dots. "Mr. Harrington is in logistics. He's a legitimate businessman." Damon spat blood onto the concrete. "Harrington is a laundry machine. He washes money for the cartel moving into the South Side. I refused to let them use my ports for human trafficking. So, Harrington invited me for a peace summit and drugged my scotch. He's keeping me alive until I give him the access codes to the union accounts." He leaned forward, the chains rattling ominously. "He's coming back tonight, isn't he? I heard the car leave early." "He's in the city," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "Mrs. Harrington. She sent me down here." "Patricia," Damon sneered. "She's worse than he is. Listen to me carefully, Sarah. Is that your name?" She nodded. "Sarah, look at my wrist." He held up his bound hands. The zip ties were cutting deep into his skin, turning his hands purple. "In my right pocket, there is a small pen. It's not a pen. It's a lockpick tool. Harrington missed it when he searched me because he's an amateur." "I can't," Sarah said, tears welling up. "If I help you, I have a sister. She needs me. I can't lose this job. I can't go to jail." "If you leave me here," Damon said intensely, his blue eye boring into her soul, "Harrington will eventually kill me. And once he kills me, he has to clean up loose ends. Do you think he'll let the maid who has access to the basement just walk away? You are already a liability." Sarah realized he was right. By stepping into this room, she had signed a death warrant. "If you help me," Damon continued, his voice dropping to a seductive, dangerous whisper, I will give you $5 million. I will put your sister in the best clinic in Switzerland. I will buy this house and burn it to the ground. But you have to cut these ties. Now. $5 million. It was an abstract number, something from a movie. But the desperation in his eyes was real. Sarah stood up, her legs shaking. She walked closer to him. The smell of blood was stronger now. She reached into his pocket, her trembling fingers brushing against his muscular thigh. She found the silver pen. "Twist the cap," Damon instructed, watching the door behind her. She twisted it. A thin, sharp metal pick slid out. "The zip ties," he said. "Jam the pick into the locking mechanism. Use your weight." Sarah fumbled with the plastic. Her hands were sweating. She jammed the metal point into the small square head of the zip tie. It slipped, scratching her hand. "Focus, Sarah," Damon said. His voice was surprisingly calm. "Deep breath. You are stronger than you think." She took a breath, gritted her teeth, and pushed with all her might. Click. The mechanism gave way. Damon ripped his hands apart, the plastic snapping. He didn't waste a second. He began massaging his wrists, wincing as the blood flow returned. "The ankle chain," he said. "It's a standard padlock. Use the pick." Just then, a noise echoed from the floor above, the sound of a heavy front door slamming shut. "Honey, I'm home early." Richard Harrington's booming voice drifted down the ventilation shaft. Sarah's eyes went wide. "He's back! He wasn't supposed to be back until tonight." Damon's face hardened into a mask of pure rage. "Time's up." "I can't undo the padlock," Sarah panicked, fumbling with the chain on his ankle. "My hands are shaking too much." Footsteps thundered on the floorboards above their heads. Heavy, angry footsteps. "Leave it," Damon hissed. He looked around the room. "Hide. Behind those crates. Now." "I can't leave you." "You aren't leaving me," he said, his voice dropping low. "You are my ace in the hole. But if he sees you, he shoots you. Hide, Sarah, and don't make a sound, no matter what happens." Sarah scrambled behind the wall of wooden crates, just as the heavy steel door at the top of the stairs beeped. Beep! 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 The code was entered. The door swung open with a groan. Richard Harrington descended the stairs, but he wasn't alone. Sarah peeked through a crack in the wood slats. Following Richard was Kenzo, the massive chauffeur, holding a silenced pistol. Richard looked impeccable in his navy suit, contrasting sharply with the grim surroundings. He walked up to Damon, who was slumped against the pillar, pretending to be as weak as he had been minutes ago. His hands were tucked behind his back, hiding the fact that they were free. "Damon, Damon," Richard sighed, adjusting his cufflinks. "I had a very frustrating meeting. The zoning board is asking questions. I don't have time for this anymore. I need those codes." Damon lifted his head slowly. "Go to hell, Richard." Richard signaled to Kenzo. The large man stepped forward and kicked Damon hard in the ribs. Damon grunted, curling in on himself, but Sarah noticed his muscles were coiled tight, ready to spring. "I'm done asking," Richard said, pulling a sleek black phone from his pocket. "I'm going to call your sister, the lovely Sophia, and I'm going to let you listen while my associates pay her a visit. Unless you give me the account numbers right now." Sarah clamped a hand over her mouth to stop a scream. Damon's demeanor changed instantly. The facade of the broken prisoner vanished. He sat up straighter, his eyes blazing with a terrifying light. "If you touch her," Damon said, his voice eerily calm, "I will peel the skin from your bones." Richard laughed. "You're chained to a pole in my basement. You're not in a position to make threats." He tapped the screen of his phone. "Dialing now." Sarah saw Damon's hands flex behind his back. He was going to make a move, but he was still chained by the ankle. He was at a disadvantage against an armed man. She looked down at her feet. The box of heavy silver platters she had carried down was sitting right next to her hiding spot. She made a choice. As Kenzo stepped closer to pistol-whip Damon again, Sarah grabbed a heavy silver serving tray, solid sterling silver, jagged at the edge from years of wear. She stepped out from the shadows. "Hey!" she screamed. Richard and Kenzo spun around, stunned to see the maid standing there. "What the—" Richard started. Sarah didn't wait. She hurled the heavy silver tray like a frisbee. It wasn't a perfect throw, but it struck Kenzo square in the face, the metal edge catching him on the bridge of the nose. Kenzo roared in pain, stumbling back, his gun waving wildly. "Now, Damon!" Sarah screamed. Damon didn't need to be told twice. With his hands free, he lunged, not at Kenzo, but at Richard. He tackled the older man, wrapping the chain that still bound his ankle around Richard's neck, using his own captivity as a weapon. The basement erupted into chaos. Gunshots went off wild, pinging against the brick walls. Sparks flew. Sarah ducked, covering her head as the world exploded around her. The sub-basement smelled of cordite and copper. The echo of the gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, ringing in Sarah's ears like a church bell. Kenzo, blinded by pain and blood from the silver tray, fired again wildly. The bullet sparked off the steel support beam inches above Damon's head. Damon didn't flinch. He tightened the chain around Richard Harrington's throat. Richard's face was turning a grotesque shade of purple, his hands clawing uselessly at the cold metal links digging into his windpipe. "Shoot him, you idiot!" Richard choked out, his voice a wet gurgle. Kenzo wiped the blood from his eyes and leveled the gun, aiming directly at Damon. But Damon was using Richard's body as a shield. "Sarah!" Damon roared. "The light!" Sarah, crouching behind the crates, understood instantly. The single hanging bulb that lit the room was dangling by a frayed wire just above Kenzo's head. She grabbed a heavy glass wine bottle from the crate next to her, a vintage 1995 Bordeaux, destined for a party she would never serve, and hurled it. Her aim was true. The bottle shattered against the bulb. Pop! The room plunged into absolute darkness. "Damn it!" Kenzo yelled. In the pitch black, the dynamic shifted. Sarah held her breath, pressing herself into the dirt floor. She heard the scuffle of leather shoes, the rattle of chains, and a sickening crack, the sound of bones snapping. Then a heavy thud as a body hit the floor. "Don't move!" Damon's voice cut through the darkness, low and lethal. A moment later, the blue light of a cell phone screen illuminated the room. Damon was standing over Kenzo. The massive chauffeur was unconscious, slumped against the wall. Richard Harrington lay motionless near the pillar, his neck at an unnatural angle. The tycoon was dead. Damon Valenti looked like a demon rising from hell. He was covered in sweat, dirt, and blood, his chest heaving. He held Kenzo's silenced pistol in his right hand and Richard's phone in his left. "Check his pockets," Damon ordered, nodding toward Richard's body. "I need the key for this padlock." Sarah scrambled forward, her hands shaking violently. She tried not to look at Richard's bulging, lifeless eyes. She patted down his suit jacket. Nothing. She checked his pants pockets. "Got it," she whispered, pulling out a small brass key. She crawled over to Damon. The smell of him was overwhelming. Musk, fear, and raw violence. She fumbled with the padlock at his ankle. It clicked open. The heavy chain fell away, clattering onto the concrete. Damon stood up, stretching his stiff limbs. He winced, clutching his side where Kenzo had kicked him, but his eyes were sharp. He walked over to Kenzo's unconscious form and stripped the man of his car keys. "We have 3 minutes before Patricia hears the noise or the neighbors call the cops," Damon said. "Can you drive?" "Yes," Sarah squeaked. Good, because I can barely walk. He leaned heavily on her shoulder. We take the service elevator to the garage. Kenzo drives a black SUV. We take that. They moved as a single unit, stumbling up the stairs. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. She had just been an accessory to murder. No, not murder. Self-defense. But would the police see it that way? They emerged into the main hallway. It was empty. The silence of the house was terrifying. They moved toward the garage entrance, but just as Sarah reached for the door handle, a voice stopped them cold. Leaving so soon? They froze. Patricia Harrington stood at the top of the main staircase. She was holding a pearl-handled revolver, her hand trembling slightly. She looked down at them, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and opportunistic greed. "I heard the shots," Patricia said, descending one step. "Is Richard dead?" "He is," Damon said, stepping in front of Sarah. He raised the gun he had taken from Kenzo. "And unless you want to join him, you'll drop that weapon. Patricia." Patricia paused. She looked at Damon, battered but unbroken, and then at Sarah. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. She lowered the revolver, but she didn't drop it. "You think I care about Richard?" She laughed, a brittle sound. "I hated him. But if I let you go, the police will ask questions, unless—" She looked at Sarah. "Unless there's a story to tell. A tragic story. The disgruntled maid, caught stealing, kills the master of the house and kidnaps his poor, traumatized wife? No, that won't work." Patricia's eyes gleamed. "Go. Take the SUV. I won't shoot." "Why?" Sarah asked, confused. "Because when the police get here," Patricia whispered, "I'm going to tell them that you and your lover down there broke in, killed my husband, and forced me to open the safe. You're going to be the most wanted woman in Illinois, Sarah. And I'm going to be the grieving widow who inherits everything." "You witch," Sarah hissed. "We're leaving," Damon said, grabbing Sarah's arm. He knew Patricia wouldn't shoot. She was a coward who preferred manipulation to violence. "Let's go." They burst into the garage. The black Cadillac Escalade was parked near the exit. Sarah jumped into the driver's seat, Damon into the passenger side. She jammed the key in, the engine roared to life, and she slammed her foot on the gas. The garage door wasn't opening fast enough. "Drive through it," Damon yelled. Sarah gritted her teeth and floored it. The heavy SUV smashed through the wooden garage door, splintering it into 1,000 pieces. They skidded onto the driveway, tires screeching, and tore down the long, winding road toward the highway. As they sped away, Sarah looked in the rearview mirror. She saw the silhouette of the Harrington mansion shrinking in the distance. Her life back there, her uniforms, her cleaning supplies, her invisibility, was gone. She was running with the wolf now. The adrenaline crash hit Sarah about 20 miles outside of Lake Forest. Her hand started shaking so badly she could barely keep the steering wheel steady. "Pull over," Damon groaned. "I can't," Sarah stammered, her eyes darting between the road and the mirrors. "They'll be looking for us. Patricia is calling 911 right now." "I said pull over," Damon gritted out. "I'm bleeding out." Sarah looked over. The dark fabric of Damon's suit was soaked through at the side. The kick from Kenzo hadn't just bruised him. One of his ribs had likely punctured something, or a stray bullet fragment had grazed him during the struggle. She swerved the Escalade off the highway and into the parking lot of a derelict truck stop. It was raining now, a cold, grey Chicago drizzle that washed over the windshield. "Switch seats," Damon commanded. "I know a place. But you can't drive us there. You don't know the route, and if we hit a checkpoint, I need to be the one talking." "You can barely sit up," Sarah argued, unbuckling her seatbelt. "I've had worse," he lied. His face was pale, his lips almost blue. They switched places in the rain. Damon grunted in agony as he slid behind the wheel. He reached into the glove compartment, pulled out a first aid kit, and swallowed 4 painkillers dry. He drove them south, avoiding the main expressways. He navigated the back streets of Chicago with an instinctual map in his head, winding through industrial parks and forgotten neighborhoods. They eventually crossed into the Iron Ridge district, an area of abandoned steel mills and crumbling brick warehouses. Damon pulled the SUV into an alleyway behind an old, nondescript auto repair shop. The sign above the door read, "Sal's Radiators," but the windows were boarded up. "Where are we?" Sarah whispered. "Home," Damon muttered. He turned off the engine and slumped against the wheel. "Help me up." Sarah practically carried him to the metal side door. He punched a code into a keypad hidden under a rusty flap. The door hissed open. Inside, it wasn't a repair shop. It was a high-tech fortress. The interior was stark, clean and modern. A sterile medical bay, a wall of monitors, and a small living area. It was a safe house, built for exactly this kind of worst-case scenario. Damon collapsed onto the leather sofa. "The fridge," he pointed. "Antibiotics, blue vial, syringe." Sarah rushed to the sleek stainless steel refrigerator. She found the vial. Her nursing instincts, skills she had learned caring for her sister before the rehab center took over, kicked in. She grabbed the supplies and knelt beside him. "I have to cut the shirt," she said. "Do it." She used a pair of scissors from the medical kit to slice open his expensive, ruined shirt. The wound was ugly. A jagged tear along his ribs, inflamed and angry. It wasn't a bullet hole, but a deep gash from the fall or the fight. "It needs stitches," Sarah said, her voice steadying. "And it's infected." "I trust you," Damon said, his eyes fluttering shut. "Just don't kill me. I still have people to kill." For the next hour, Sarah worked. She cleaned the wound, administered the antibiotics, and stitched his skin with trembling but precise hands. Damon passed out from the pain halfway through. When she was finished, she washed the blood from her hands in the sink. She caught her reflection in the metal surface. She looked wild. Her hair was loose, her maid's uniform stained with the blood of a Mafia don. She walked over to the wall of monitors. One of them was tuned to the local news. "Breaking news," the banner read. The screen showed a photo of her. It was her driver's license photo, looking young and innocent. The anchor's voice was grave. "Police are searching for Sarah Miller, 24, in connection with the brutal home invasion and murder of prominent businessman Richard Harrington. Miller, a domestic worker employed by the family, is believed to have acted with an accomplice. Patricia Harrington, the victim's wife, was held at gunpoint but unharmed. Authorities warn that Miller is considered armed and dangerous." Sarah's knees gave out. She slid down the wall, burying her face in her hands. "Armed and dangerous," a voice rasped. She looked up. Damon was awake, watching the screen. He looked weak, but the color was returning to his face. "They framed me," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm a murderer. I can never go back. Emily, the rehab center. They'll kick her out if they find out." Damon sat up slowly. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't tell her it would be okay. He looked at her with a terrifying intensity. "You are not a murderer, Sarah. You are a soldier now. You saved my life." "I ruined mine," she shouted, the stress finally breaking her. "I had a plan. I was going to pay off the debt, get Emily out, and live a normal life. Now I'm nothing." Damon stood up. It took effort, but he walked across the room and stood over her. He reached down and tilted her chin up, so she had to look him in the eye. You are never going to pay off that debt, he said softly. The system is designed to keep people like you on your knees. Harrington would have fired you in a month. Your sister would have ended up on the street. He leaned closer. But that life is over. You are under my protection now, and the Valenti family takes care of its own. He walked to a secure phone on the desk and dialed a number. Who are you calling? Sarah asked. My brother Lucas, Damon said. And my lawyer. It's time to let Chicago know the king isn't dead. He paused, holding the receiver. But first we have a problem. What? The Harringtons were just the middlemen, Damon said darkly. The people who paid them, the ones who want my shipping routes, they are the real threat. And they have a tracker. Sarah froze. A tracker? Where? Damon pointed to the SUV parked outside in the alley, visible on the security monitor. Kenzo's car, Damon said. I forgot to check for a low jack. They know we're here. On the screen, 3 black vans pulled into the alleyway, blocking the exit. Men in tactical gear spilled out, carrying assault rifles. Get the shotgun from the locker, Damon said, his voice calm, the predator taking over. School is out, Sarah. Time to learn how to shoot. The first bullet didn't hit flesh. It shattered the reinforced glass of the front window, sending a spiderweb of cracks through the blackout tint. Get down! Damon roared, tackling Sarah behind the heavy steel counter of the medical bay. The impact jarred his stitched wound, and he let out a guttural growl of pain, his face turning ashen. Outside, the alley was a cacophony of shouting men and screeching tires. The mercenaries weren't waiting. They were professionals, likely ex-military, hired by the cartel moving in on the south side. The shotgun, Sarah, Damon barked, pressing the Glock into his own hand. Pump it. Aim low. The recoil will kick it up. Sarah scrambled on her hands and knees to the locker. Her fingers were numb, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She grabbed the Mossberg 500. It was heavy, smelling of gun oil and cold steel. She had never fired a gun in her life. She was a maid who dusted hunting trophies, not someone who created them. Crash. The back door was rammed. Once. Twice. Then the lock gave way with a screech of tearing metal. 2 men in tactical vests burst in, weapons raised. Clear left, one shouted. Damon didn't hesitate. He popped up from behind the counter, firing 2 controlled shots. Bang! Bang! The first man dropped, a bullet in his shoulder. The second man returned fire, the rounds pinging off the metal cabinets, showering Sarah in sparks. Sarah, cover the door, Damon yelled, sliding across the floor to get a better angle. She spun around, raising the shotgun. A shadow loomed in the doorway, a third mercenary raising an assault rifle. She didn't think. She squeezed the trigger. Boom! The sound was thunderous in the small space. The recoil slammed the stock into her shoulder, bruising the bone instantly. Her aim was terrible, but at close range. With buckshot, it didn't matter. The blast took a chunk out of the doorframe and sent wood splinters flying into the man's face. He screamed, clutching his eyes, stumbling back. Good girl, Damon yelled. Now move, the grease pit. The what? The floor, under the rug. Sarah threw the rug aside. Beneath it was a metal grate covering an old mechanic's grease pit. But it wasn't just a pit. It was a tunnel. Damon kicked the latch, and the grate swung open. Go, he ordered. Not without you. Sarah grabbed his arm, hauling him up. He was dead weight now, the adrenaline fading, the blood loss catching up to him. Bullets shredded the cabinets above their heads as more men poured into the room. They tumbled into the dark pit, Sarah pulling the heavy grate shut above them, just as a grenade rolled across the floor of the safe house. Thump boom. The explosion above shook the earth, raining dust and concrete onto their heads. The shockwave knocked the wind out of Sarah, but the tunnel held. Move, Damon whispered in the dark, clicking on a small penlight. "It leads to the sewer main, then to the river." They crawled through the damp, rat-infested tunnel for what felt like miles. Sarah dragged Damon half the way. Her uniform was torn, her knees scraped raw, her shoulder throbbing from the shotgun kick. She was exhausted, terrified, and covered in filth, but she was alive. They emerged under a concrete bridge near the Chicago River. The cold night air hit them like a slap. Parked inconspicuously under the bridge was a nondescript grey Honda Civic, another one of Damon's contingency plans. Damon leaned against the concrete piling, sliding down until he hit the dirt. He looked bad. His eyes were glassy. "Keys," he mumbled, pointing to a magnetic box hidden inside the wheel well, under the fender. Sarah retrieved the keys and helped him into the passenger seat. "Where are we going?" she asked, starting the car. "The police are everywhere. They have my face on TV." Damon looked at her. In the dim light of the dashboard, she looked feral. Blood on her cheek, hair wild, eyes hard. She wasn't the trembling girl he found in the basement anymore. "We go to the one place the police can't touch," Damon said, his voice fading. "The penthouse. Drive to the Loop. And Sarah." "Yes. Don't stop for red lights." The Valenti penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of the Obsidian Tower, a glass needle piercing the Chicago skyline. It was a fortress in the sky, accessible only by a private elevator with biometric scanners. Sarah drove the battered Honda right up to the private underground entrance. 2 massive security guards stepped out, hands on their holstered weapons. Sarah didn't wait. She rolled down the window. "I have Damon Valenti. He's dying." The guard's demeanor changed instantly. One spoke into a wrist microphone while the other ripped the passenger door open. They saw their boss, unconscious and bleeding, and panic ensued. "Code Red! Get the medical team to the elevator! Now!" They hauled Damon out. Sarah scrambled to follow, but a heavy hand clamped onto her shoulder. "Hold it!" the guard growled. "Who are you?" "I'm the one who saved him," Sarah snapped, swatting his hand away. "And if he dies because you're detaining me, his brother will skin you alive." She didn't know if that was true, but she remembered Damon mentioning his brother, Lucas. The guard hesitated, intimidated by her ferocity, despite her ragged appearance. "Bring her up," a voice crackled over the guard's earpiece. "Lucas wants to see her." The elevator ride was a blur. When the doors opened, they weren't in a hallway, but in a sprawling living room that looked more like a museum. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights. White marble floors, modern art, and leather furniture shouted extreme wealth. Damon was already being wheeled down a corridor by a team of private doctors. Sarah was left standing in the center of the room, dripping sewer water onto the pristine marble. A man walked in from the balcony. He looked like Damon, but sharper, leaner. He wore a tailored suit and held a crystal tumbler of whiskey. This was Lucas Valenti. He didn't smile. He walked a circle around Sarah, inspecting her like a prize horse that had been through a mudslide. "So," Lucas said, his voice smooth and dangerous, "you're the maid." "I'm Sarah." "According to the news, you're a cop killer and a thief." Lucas took a sip of his drink. "Patricia Harrington says you seduced my brother, forced him to help you rob her husband, and then shot Richard in cold blood." "Patricia is a liar," Sarah said, her voice shaking but firm. "Richard kidnapped Damon. He was torturing him in the basement. I let him out." Lucas stopped in front of her. "And why would a nice girl like you help a monster like my brother? For the money?" "He offered me $5 million, Sarah admitted. "But I didn't do it for the money. I did it because nobody deserves to die like that." Chained up in the dark. Lucas stared at her for a long moment. Then He pulled a gun from his waistband. Sarah flinched, but she didn't run. There was nowhere to run. "Damon is unconscious," Lucas said softly, leveling the gun at her chest. "He can't protect you. If you are a mole, if you are working for the cartel or the feds, tell me now, and I'll make it quick." "I am a maid," Sarah screamed, tears finally spilling over. "I clean toilets. I don't know anything about cartels. I just wanted to save my sister." The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Lucas's finger tightened on the trigger. "Put it down, Lucas." The voice was weak, raspy, but commanding. Damon was standing at the end of the hallway. He was shirtless, his torso wrapped in fresh bandages, an IV drip on a rolling stand beside him. He looked like death warmed over, but he was standing. "Damon," Lucas lowered the gun, relief washing over his face. "You should be in surgery." "I heard shouting," Damon grunted, limping into the room. He walked past his brother and stood in front of Sarah. He reached out, his rough hand cupping her cheek. He wiped away a smudge of dirt with his thumb. "She is under my protection," Damon said to the room, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "She is the only reason I am alive. Anyone who touches her answers to me." Lucas holstered his gun. He looked from Damon to Sarah, calculating. Then he nodded. "Fine. But we have a problem. The police have the building surrounded. They know she's here. Patricia gave a press conference an hour ago. She's playing the grieving widow perfectly. She has the public on her side." Damon turned to the window, looking out at the city he claimed to own. "Patricia thinks she has won because she controls the narrative. She thinks I'm dead or on the run. She doesn't know I'm back in the tower." He turned back to Sarah. "You want to clear your name, Sarah?" "Yes," she whispered. "Then we have to stop hiding," Damon said. A cold, ruthless smile touched his lips. "Tomorrow night is the mayor's charity gala. Patricia is the guest of honor. She's going to be there to collect donations in her dead husband's name." "So?" Lucas asked. "So," Damon said. "We are going to crash the party." He looked Sarah up and down, taking in her torn uniform and muddy shoes. "Lucas, get the stylist. Get the best tailor in Chicago. Get the jewelers." Damon leaned in close to Sarah, his blue eyes burning with a promise of vengeance. "They called you the invisible maid. Tomorrow, you're going to be the only thing they look at. We're going to walk in through the front door, and we're going to burn Patricia's lie to the ground." Sarah looked at him. She was terrified. She was exhausted. But standing next to him, in the center of his power, she felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. "What do I have to do?" Sarah asked. Damon smirked. "Just wear the dress and leave the rest to me." The grand ballroom of the Palmer House. Hilton was a sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and fake smiles. The mayor's charity gala was the event of the season, and tonight the guest of honor was the grieving widow, Patricia Harrington. Patricia stood at the podium, bathed in a spotlight, dabbing a dry eye with a lace handkerchief. She wore a modest black gown, portraying the image of a heartbroken saint. "My husband, Richard, was a man of peace," Patricia told the captivated audience of Chicago's elite. "He was taken from me by a senseless act of violence. A woman we welcomed into our home, a maid we trusted, betrayed us. Sarah Miller is a monster, but we must not let her darkness dim our light." The crowd applauded politely. The police commissioner stood in the front row, nodding solemnly. Patricia soaked it in. She had done it. She had killed her husband, framed the maid, and was about to inherit an empire. "And so," Patricia continued, her voice strengthening, "I am establishing the Richard Harrington Foundation to—" The massive double doors at the back of the ballroom slammed open with a sound like a gunshot. The music stopped. The applause died. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was not the police, and it certainly wasn't a fugitive maid cowering in fear. It was Damon Valenti. He wore a bespoke tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders like armor. He didn't look like a kidnap victim. He looked like a king returning to reclaim his throne. His arm was linked with a woman who made the entire room gasp. Sarah Miller. Gone was the grey uniform. Gone was the messy bun. She wore a gown of liquid crimson silk that hugged every curve, slashed high up the thigh to reveal a diamond-encrusted stiletto. Her blonde hair cascaded in Hollywood waves, and around her neck sat a diamond necklace worth more than the Harrington mansion itself. She didn't look down. She looked straight at Patricia. "I think you skipped a part of the story, Patricia." Damon's voice boomed across the silent hall. He didn't need a microphone. Patricia gripped the podium, her knuckles white. "Security! Arrest them! That's the murderer!" 2 security guards stepped forward, but Lucas Valenti and a dozen of his men stepped out from the shadows of the hallway, forming a protective wall behind Damon and Sarah. The guards retreated. Damon and Sarah walked down the center aisle, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. The sound of Sarah's heels clicking on the marble floor was the only sound in the room. They stopped at the foot of the stage. "You told them I was dead," Damon said, his eyes cold blue fire. "You told them Sarah killed Richard." "She did!" Patricia shrieked, her composure cracking. "She's a thief and a killer." "No," Sarah spoke. Her voice was clear, steady, amplified by the acoustics of the room. "I'm the woman who found the man you chained in your basement, the man you and your husband tortured for 2 weeks. Lies!" Patricia screamed. "Commissioner, do something!" The police commissioner looked at Damon, then at Patricia. He stayed seated. "In Chicago, you didn't bet against the Valentis when they were standing in the room." Damon pulled a small remote from his pocket and pointed it at the giant projection screen behind Patricia, the one displaying a photo of Richard. "We found Richard's cloud backup," Damon said calmly. "It seems he didn't trust you either, Patricia. He recorded your final conversation before he went to the city yesterday." Damon pressed the button. The image of Richard disappeared. Audio began to play over the ballroom speakers. It was crystal clear. "Patricia, put the gun away. You're crazy." Richard's voice. "I'm tired of waiting, Richard. If you don't get the codes from Valenti soon, the cartel will kill us both. I'm going to make a deal with them directly. I'll give them you, and I'll give them Valenti." Patricia's voice. "You can't do this. I'm your husband." "You're a liability. And the maid. I'll frame her." "Who looks at a maid, Richard? She's a ghost. Nobody cares about trash like her." The audio cut off. The silence in the ballroom was heavy, suffocating. Patricia stood frozen, her face drained of all color. She looked at the crowd. Disgust replaced admiration. The donors, the politicians, the socialites. They all backed away. "Trash," Sarah said, stepping onto the stage. She towered over Patricia in her heels. "That's what you called me. That's what you treated me like. I scrubbed your floors. I washed your clothes. I was invisible to you." Sarah leaned in close, her voice a dangerous whisper that the front row could hear. "But you forgot one thing, Mrs. Harrington. When you treat people like they don't exist, they see everything. And they hear everything." Sirens wailed outside. Real police this time. The commissioner finally stood up, signaling his officers. "Patricia Harrington," the commissioner said, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and racketeering." As the officers handcuffed a screaming Patricia and dragged her off the stage, Damon stepped up beside Sarah. He took her hand and kissed the knuckles. "Let's go," he said. "The air in here stinks of hypocrisy." 3 days later. The Harrington estate was quiet. The crime scene tape had been removed. A black limousine pulled up the long driveway. The driver opened the door, and Sarah stepped out. She wasn't wearing a gown today, but a sharp, white-tailored suit. She looked like a CEO. Damon stood by the front door, leaning against the frame. He looked better. The stitches were healing. "It's done," Damon said as she approached. "My lawyers finalized the transfer this morning. The seizure of assets was rapid." "And Emily?" Sarah asked. "Settled in the clinic in Zurich." Damon smiled. "I spoke to the doctors an hour ago. She's walking, Sarah. She's going to make a full recovery." Sarah let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for years. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. She was done crying. "Thank you, Damon. For everything. The money. I can never repay you." "The money was the deal," Damon shrugged. $5 million. It's in your account." "So," Sarah looked at the massive house. "What happens now? You go back to your tower and I go find a new life." Damon pushed off the doorframe and walked toward her. He stopped inches away, his presence overwhelming. "We need to talk about the twist," he said softly. Sarah frowned. "The what?" "The truth," Damon corrected himself, "about why I was in that basement, and why you were working here." "I told you," Sarah said. "I needed the money for Emily's bills after the hit and run." "Yes," Damon said. His face darkened. "The hit and run that crippled your sister 2 years ago. The police never found the driver. The case was buried." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "How do you know that?" Damon reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was an old police report, stamped classified. "When I hacked Harrington's files," Damon said, "I found his personal insurance records. 2 years ago, on the night of November 14th, Richard Harrington's Jaguar came into the shop for emergency bodywork. Front bumper, grille, hood." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "No." "Richard was driving drunk," Damon said, his voice hard with fury on her behalf. "He hit Emily's car. Patricia was in the passenger seat. They didn't call 911. They called their lawyer. They paid off the precinct captain to destroy the footage. They left your sister to die on the road." Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. A wave of nausea and rage crashed over her. The people she had served, the people whose toilets she had scrubbed, they were the ones who had destroyed her family. "They watched you," Damon continued. "They knew who you were when they hired you. Patricia thought it was funny to have the sister of their victim scrubbing their floors. It was a sick game to her." Sarah looked at the house, the beautiful limestone mansion. It didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a tomb. "I want to burn it down," Sarah whispered, shaking. "You could," Damon said. "Or—" He took her hand and placed a heavy set of iron keys in her palm. "You can live in it. You can sell it. You can turn it into a homeless shelter. You can do whatever you want." Sarah looked at the keys. "Why?" "Because you don't just work here anymore, Sarah," Damon said, a slow smirk spreading across his face. "I bought the debt, I seized the assets, and I put the deed in your name." Sarah's eyes went wide. "What?" "You own the Harrington estate," Damon said. "Every brick, every painting, every dirty secret. It's all yours. You aren't the maid, Sarah. You're the lady of the manor." Sarah looked from the keys to Damon, the man who had entered her life as a bloody prisoner in the dark, was now giving her the kingdom. "Why would you do that?" she asked breathlessly. That's millions of dollars." Damon stepped closer, wrapping his arm around her waist and pulling her flush against him. He looked down at her with a mix of possessiveness and adoration. "Because you saved the king," he whispered against her lips, "and a queen deserves a castle." Sarah looked up at him. The fear was gone. The poverty was gone. The invisible girl was gone. She closed her hand tight around the keys. "Then I have my first order of business," she said, a wicked smile matching his. "And what is that?" "Fire the staff," Sarah said, "and tell Mrs. Gable she's getting a raise." Damon laughed, a rich, genuine sound. He kissed her, deep and passionate, right there on the doorstep of the house she used to clean. The poor maid was gone. Sarah Valenti, though she didn't have the name yet, she knew she would soon, had arrived. And Chicago would never be the same. And that is the incredible story of Sarah and Damon. From the darkness of a basement to the top of the Chicago underworld, Sarah proved that even the most invisible person can bring down an empire if they have enough courage and the right ally. It turns out, karma doesn't just knock on the door. Sometimes it has a key to the basement. I hope you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and justice. If you did, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you found a mafia boss in your basement? Would you have run, or would you have made the deal? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.